Have you ever done everything for the people you love, only to discover that when you finally needed them, not one of them would show up? When I woke up after major surgery, I expected pain. I expected weakness. I expected a long recovery. What I didn't expect was the empty chair beside my hospital bed. My name is Richard Hayes. I'm 68 years old, a retired postal supervisor from Sacramento, California. For more than 3 decades, I showed up for people. I rarely missed work. I never complained. And when my 4 children needed me, I was there. Their names were Michael, Daniel, Laura, and Sophie. I taught them how to ride bicycles in the driveway of our old house. I drove them to school, paid bills when they were short, helped with college expenses, fixed their cars, attended graduations, and sat through countless events that fathers attend, because that's what fathers do. I never kept score. I didn't think love was supposed to be an accounting system. Then came October. My left hip had been hurting for years. I'd managed it with medication, injections, and stubbornness, but eventually my doctor told me there was nothing left to manage. I needed a replacement. 3 weeks before surgery, I called all 4 children. "Don't worry, Dad," Michael said, "we'll take turns." Daniel promised, "Someone will always be there." Laura said, "I'll take the first couple of days." Sophie sent heart emojis and wrote, "Of course, Dad, we'll all be there." I believed them. Monday morning I entered Mercy General Hospital. The surgery went well. When I woke up around 1 in the afternoon, everything felt blurry. My hip throbbed. My mouth was dry. My body felt like someone had taken it apart and put it back together. But I wasn't afraid, because I knew someone would be sitting beside me. I slowly turned my head. The chair was empty. I waited. 1 hour. Then 2. At 4 o'clock, I texted Michael. Out of surgery. Room 314. Then Daniel. Then Laura. Then Sophie. I kept looking at the door. Every time footsteps passed in the hallway, I thought one of them had finally arrived. Nobody did. At 7:42 that evening, Michael finally texted. "So glad surgery went well, Dad. We'll be there tomorrow." Tomorrow. I stared at that word for a long time. Then, I put my phone down. Tomorrow, I whispered. I still believed him. I just didn't know that tomorrow would become the beginning of the greatest lesson my children had ever taught me. Tuesday morning came. No Michael. No Daniel. No Laura. No Sophie. I told myself they were busy. People have jobs. Families have responsibilities. Life gets complicated. So I didn't complain. I did my physical therapy exercises alone. I watched television. I read a book. I talked with my nurse, Angela Brooks, who had been working at the hospital for years. She was kind. Too kind sometimes. By the afternoon, Daniel texted. "How are you feeling, Dad?" "Should be able to swing by tomorrow. Should be able to." Those 4 words somehow hurt more than silence. That evening, Laura called. "Dad, I'm really sorry. Something came up at work." "It's okay," I said. "You aren't upset, are you?" I looked around my hospital room. "I just had my hip replaced, Laura. My emotional range is a little limited right now." She laughed nervously. "I'll definitely come this week." She didn't. Wednesday became Thursday. Thursday became Friday. Then Saturday. Every day I found myself looking toward that same empty chair. By Sunday it had become almost embarrassing. Not for me. For them. Angela walked into my room that morning carrying a cup of coffee. She checked my chart, checked my medication, checked my hip. Then she looked at the chair. She had been looking at it for 7 days. Finally, she asked quietly, "Mr. Hayes, do you have children?" I swallowed. 4. She nodded. Then she said nothing. She didn't need to. I knew what she was thinking. I also knew what I was thinking. "They're busy," I said. Angela looked at me with an expression I will never forget. I know. 2 simple words. But she didn't say them like she believed me. She said them like she had heard that excuse 1,000 times from fathers, mothers, husbands, and wives who were trying to protect the people who had failed them. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling. For years, I'd told myself that my children were independent, successful, busy. I had been proud of that. But now, another thought entered my mind. What if I had confused independence with indifference? What if I had spent 40 years teaching them that Dad would always handle everything? Maybe I had made myself too dependable. Maybe I had accidentally taught them that I didn't need anyone. But then another thought came. They promised. All 4 of them promised. Nobody forced them. Nobody asked for perfection. I wasn't asking them to quit their jobs. I wasn't asking them to sit beside me every minute. I only wanted someone to show up. One person. 1 hour. One visit. Nothing. On the 9th day, I called my oldest friend, Frank Miller. Frank, I said, I need you to do something for me. What? Call my attorney, Robert Collins. There was silence. Why? Because I need to change something. What are you changing? I looked at the empty chair. My future. And for the first time since surgery, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt clear. Because sometimes the moment people stop showing up for you is the moment you finally start showing up for yourself. 14 days in a hospital teaches you things. It teaches you how much pain the human body can tolerate. It teaches you how slowly time moves when nobody visits. But most importantly, it teaches you who you are when nobody is watching. My attorney, Robert Collins, agreed to meet me after discharge. I didn't tell my children. There was no reason to. This wasn't revenge. At least, that's what I told myself. On Wednesday morning, my doctor cleared me to leave. Angela brought my paperwork. Is someone coming to pick you up? She asked. I'm taking a ride share. She frowned. Then she brought me a wheelchair anyway. At the hospital entrance, she looked at me. Take care of yourself, Mr. Hayes. I will. She hesitated. I've worked here a long time. Sometimes the people who leave alone are the people who spent their whole lives taking care of everybody else. That sentence stayed with me. My driver, Marcus, helped me into the car. When we reached my house, he looked at me. Want me to wait until you're inside? I'll be fine. I'll wait. He didn't ask again. He just parked. Another stranger showed more concern for me in 10 minutes than my 4 children had shown in 14 days. I walked into my house slowly, and then I noticed the mail. A huge pile. The dishes were exactly where I'd left them. Nothing had moved. Then I saw the plant. It was a peace lily my late wife, Margaret, had planted 12 years earlier. The leaves were hanging down. It hadn't been watered. For 14 days. I stood there staring at it. That plant had survived everything. And my children couldn't water it once. I filled a glass. Poured the water into the soil. Then another glass. I sat at the kitchen table. For the first time I understood. This wasn't about money. It wasn't even about the hospital. It was about reality. I had built my entire estate plan around the assumption that my children would be there when I needed them. But now I had evidence that the assumption was wrong. That Friday, Frank drove me to Robert's office. Robert placed my old will on the table. It divided everything equally among my 4 children. He looked at me. Richard, what do you want to change? Everything. He raised an eyebrow. I want a trust. What kind? The house. My retirement accounts. My savings. Everything. And your children? They'll receive something. All 4? Yes. Robert looked surprised. But not the house? No. Why? I leaned back. Because I'm not punishing them. I paused. I'm accepting what they've shown me. I told him I wanted the majority of my estate placed into a charitable trust, benefiting a local food bank and a nursing education fund at Mercy General. Angela had brought me coffee for 10 days. She had checked on me. She had noticed the empty chair. She had cared. I wanted future nurses to have better opportunities because of her. Robert listened carefully. Then he asked, Are you certain? I looked him straight in the eye. I spent 14 days thinking about it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't trying to make anyone suffer. I was simply changing my plans to match reality. The old will had been based on hope. The new one would be based on evidence. And that difference was about to change everything. The paperwork took 2 weeks. During those 2 weeks, I recovered. I walked with a cane. I did my exercises. I watered the peace lily. And slowly it began to stand upright again, just like me. Then, suddenly, my children started coming. Michael arrived first. He stood in my living room looking uncomfortable. Dad, I owe you an apology. Sit down. He sat. I thought Daniel was going. Daniel had apparently thought Laura was going. Laura thought Sophie was going, and Sophie thought everyone else had it covered. 4 adults, 4 assumptions, 0 visits. We dropped the ball, Michael whispered. I nodded. I know. I'm really sorry. I believe you. He looked relieved. Are we okay? I love you, Michael. His shoulders relaxed. But I want to ask you something. Okay, if you had surgery and none of us came to see you for 14 days, how would you feel? He stared at the floor. Bad, how bad? Really bad. Exactly, he nodded. What can I do? I looked at him. Show up. That's all I said. Not because of my money. Not because I'm your father. Not because you expect something from me. I leaned forward. Show up, because people matter. Michael nodded. I will. Daniel came 2 days later. Then Laura. Then Sophie. Each one gave me a different explanation. Work, schedules, miscommunication, assumptions. Nobody intended to abandon me. But intention doesn't erase consequences. I listened. I accepted their apologies. I hugged them. Because I still loved my children. But I did not tell them about the trust. They didn't know. And I wasn't hiding it to manipulate them. That distinction mattered to me. If I told them, they might suddenly become perfect children. They might start calling every day. They might visit every weekend. But I would never know whether they were doing it because they loved me, or because they were afraid of losing their inheritance. I wanted to know who they were, without the money hanging over their heads. So I said nothing. Meanwhile, Robert finalized the documents. My financial advisor, Samuel Price, reviewed everything. The house would no longer automatically belong to my children. The primary assets would support causes I believed in. My children would still receive modest annual distributions, enough to know they had not been erased from my life, but not enough to make my estate a reward for promises they hadn't kept. Frank watched me sign the final documents. How do you feel? I looked at the signature. Peaceful? Not angry? No, I smiled. Anger would mean I'm still waiting for them to understand what they did. I closed the folder. I'm not waiting anymore. And that was the moment I realized something important. The best revenge isn't making someone suffer. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to let their failure control the rest of your life. A few days after the documents were finalized, I invited all 4 children to dinner. It was the first time we'd all been together since my surgery. I made my late wife's pot roast. 4 hours of cooking. The smell filled the house. For a moment it felt like the old days. Michael laughed at something Daniel said. Laura teased Sophie. Sophie threw a dinner roll at her brother. Everyone laughed, and I watched them. My children were grown now. Successful, busy, imperfect, human. After dinner, we moved into the living room. Coffee was poured. The house became quiet. I sat down. I want to say something. Everyone stopped talking. I'm not going to give a speech about the hospital. Michael lowered his eyes. I think you all know what happened. Nobody argued. I continued. I'm 68 years old. I'm healthy. My hip is healing. Hopefully I have many years ahead of me. I paused. But when you reach this age, you realize something. They listened. You don't have unlimited time. I looked around the room. Your mother used to say that love lives in the details. I smiled. She was right. The phone calls, the doctor's appointments, the little things, the watered plants. I looked toward the kitchen, the things nobody celebrates. I took a breath. I love all 4 of you. No one moved. And that isn't conditional. Michael's eyes were wet. But love doesn't mean pretending something didn't happen. Silence. I needed you. My voice softened. I wasn't asking for money. I wasn't asking you to fix my life. I just wanted someone to sit in a chair. Laura wiped her eyes. I know you didn't mean to hurt me. I looked at all 4. But sometimes people hurt you without intending to. Nobody spoke. So here's what I want from you. I leaned back. Show up. Daniel nodded. For each other. I continued. For me. And for anyone who needs you. Sophie stood up. She walked over and hugged me. Then Michael. Then Laura. Then Daniel. For a moment, we were simply a family again, and I let myself enjoy it. But there was one thing they still didn't know. The documents were already signed. The future they assumed was waiting for them had changed. Not because I wanted revenge, because I had learned something. Love can remain unconditional. Trust cannot, and neither can responsibility. That night, after everyone left, I walked into the kitchen. The peace lily stood tall beneath the window. I touched one of its leaves. That's better, I whispered. And somehow, I felt like I was talking about more than a plant. The truth about my estate stayed quiet. Weeks became months. My children continued their lives. But something had changed. They started calling more. Michael checked in every Sunday. Daniel stopped by whenever he was nearby. Laura began remembering my medical appointments. Sophie started bringing groceries. I noticed every little thing, but I never told them why. Because I wasn't testing them. I was observing. There is a difference. One afternoon, I returned to Mercy General. My hip was stronger. I no longer needed the walker. I walked into the nursing office and asked for the supervisor. I want to make a donation. The supervisor looked surprised. To the Nursing Education Fund. I handed over the information. I want it made in honor of Angela Brooks. Angela happened to walk into the room. She froze. Mr. Hayes? I smiled. Hello, Angela. Her eyes filled with tears. You didn't have to do this. I know. I shook her hand. But you showed up. She looked down. I was doing my job. No, I said. You were doing more than your job. I told her about my trust. I told her about the food bank. I told her that the majority of my estate would eventually help people who needed it. Not because my children were bad people, but because I had discovered that wealth is most meaningful when it supports something you believe in. Angela hugged me, and that was my revenge. Not against my children. Against the version of myself that had spent decades believing I had to earn love by constantly giving. I finally understood. My children weren't entitled to my sacrifice. My money wasn't proof of my love, and my future didn't belong to anyone else. That evening, I sat alone in my kitchen. The same kitchen where I'd raised 4 children. The same table where we'd eaten thousands of meals. The same window where my wife's peace lily stood. I thought about the empty hospital chair. 14 days. Not one visit. But those 14 days had given me something I couldn't buy. Clarity. I had spent my entire life showing up. Now I had learned how to show up for myself. And perhaps that was the most satisfying revenge of all. I didn't destroy my children. I didn't humiliate them. I didn't threaten them. I simply stopped building my future around people who had shown me they might not be there. The old version of me would have felt guilty. The new version understood. A boundary isn't hatred. A boundary is information. It tells people where you end, and where their responsibility begins. Months passed. My hip healed. I started walking longer distances. Then one Sunday afternoon, all 4 of my children showed up at my house. No emergency. No birthday. No request. They simply came. Michael brought groceries. Daniel brought a toolbox because he'd noticed the loose railing outside. Laura brought dinner. Sophie brought flowers. I stood in the doorway and watched them. For a second, I remembered the hospital. That empty chair. That silent room. That terrible question. Do I have children? Then I looked at my children standing in front of me. The chair had been empty. But it wasn't anymore, and I realized something. The point was never to make them suffer. The point was to stop suffering myself. My estate documents were still in place. The trust was still in place. The donations were still going to the causes I cared about. None of that changed. But my relationship with my children had changed too, because now it was based on reality, not expectations. Not guilt, not money, not promises. Actions. Michael walked over. Dad? Yeah? How's the hip? I smiled. Better, he nodded. Good. Then, he looked at the kitchen. Need help with dinner? I laughed. Since when do you offer? He grinned. Since I realized you won't be around forever. That sentence hit me harder than he knew. I put my hand on his shoulder. That's all I ever wanted you to understand. We went inside. That evening we sat around the same table where they'd eaten as children. There was laughter, arguments, stories, normal family noise. And I realized something. Sometimes revenge doesn't end with someone losing. Sometimes it ends with you refusing to lose yourself. My children had failed me. That was true. But they were also learning. And I was learning too. I had learned that love doesn't require unlimited access to your life. I had learned that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting. And I had learned that generosity means more when it comes from choice instead of obligation. The peace lily still stood in the kitchen window. Tall, green, alive. I watered it every few days, just like my wife had taught me. And whenever I looked at it, I remembered the 14 days. The empty chair. The unanswered messages. The stranger who waited until I got inside. The nurse who brought me coffee. The friend who made soup. and the decision that changed my life. I didn't punish my children. I simply stopped rewarding promises and started valuing actions. Because in the end, the most powerful revenge isn't making someone regret what they did. It's becoming completely at peace with what you finally learned. And if you've ever had someone promise to be there for you, only to disappear when you needed them most, remember this: don't beg people to show up. Notice who does, and build your life accordingly. If this story touched you, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, would you have changed your will after 14 days alone in the hospital? And remember, sometimes the person who stops showing up for everyone else is finally the person who starts showing up for themselves. Until the next story.